Good evening and welcome to City Council chambers here on Wednesday, right? Tuesday, yeah, thank you. Tuesday, February 9th, evening of about 6:05 in the evening. My name is Steve Garrett. I'm with the land planning firm of Lucie and Associates. With me to my left is Mr. Paul Goulis with Lucie and Associates. And to my right is Mr. Steph Mathis with Culpeper and Turpinning, a civil engineering firm. We'd first like to welcome everybody who's joining virtually and appreciate your ability to join us tonight and participate. We are here tonight for the St. James Drive Corridor Enhancement Program. This is the community meeting, and we are looking forward to presenting where we are to date with this project and gain hopefully a lot of input and input from the residents within this neighborhood and within the city. So we don't have any definitive answers tonight. This is to present what we found out to date through our various stakeholder meetings and to gain more input from the residents. And then we'll take this input and refine that into a set of documents that we can move forward with the city. I would like, before we start, to acknowledge our team, obviously Mr. Mathis, Mr. Goulis here with us tonight, Scott Wolf from Lucie and Associates also as part of the team. But first and foremost, John Dutton, who's the first Deputy Public Works Director for the City of Port St. Lucie. And then a special thanks this evening for Avi and the media relations and production team here at the city for coordinating this and supporting us this evening, especially when we get to the interactive questioning part. So thank you in advance for that, Avi, and your team. I mentioned we had a series of stakeholder meetings to get us here tonight. We broke up very early on in the process into 3 stakeholder groups. They consisted of individuals that would focus on safety, another group for multimodal aspects, and a third being the environmental aspects, which would be landscape, stormwater, and environmental components of the project. Those stakeholders in those meetings consisted of and were participated by Mr. Marty Sanders with St. Lucie County School Board, Chief of Police John Bulldog with the City of Port St. Lucie, City Public Works Department in general. With St. Lucie County, we had Ms. Kim Graham, Mr. Don West, Pete D. Pasquale, and Amanda Thompson as well from the Environmental Resources Division. And then from the city, we also had participation by Ms. Kate Parmalee and Ms. Roxanne Chesser. And if I missed anybody, I apologize, but the stakeholder meetings were very productive, and we gained a lot of information and coordinated a lot of items and issues that I think you'll see tonight in the presentation. So with that, we will begin the presentation. And just to note, this is more interactive, at least from participation here before you tonight between Steph, myself, and Paul. So as we go through slides, you may have multiple responses and input being gained in case I happen to miss anything. So with that, we'll start.
Real quick, you just mentioned about the Q&A box, so you can ask questions and we'll get to them.
Yeah, thank you. Avi is reminding me that relative to the Q&A portion, we will have, after we go through the presentation, we've devoted amount of time for questions and answers. So feel free to ask those questions online. Avi will then, when we get to that portion of the meeting, read those questions to us, and as a panel, we'll respond to them. Appreciate that. Thanks, Avi. So we're here before you tonight to present the St. James Drive Corridor enhancements. Our task is to provide the city, and through John Dutton's leadership, design and construction recommendations to improve the safety, multimodal, and environmental systems within the project area. What is the project area? Great question. So before you is a slide showing the project area. It's approximately 2.4 miles of the existing St. James corridor. At the very north or top of the screen, the project starts south of Midway and runs south all the way to our southern limits at the bottom of the sheet, which is really the southern limits of the St. Lucie North neighborhood within the city of Port St. Lucie. And this entire area is within that neighborhood that has been named and identified. Some of the items on the slide that you'll see, we broke it out and color-coded it so we could get a sense of the land uses and the use and what the existing characteristics from a use and development standpoint are. Yellow being the predominant color you see on the screen is our existing residential neighborhoods. Green being the second most area, and that's environmental and or landscape or drainage systems within the city. In the very center of the image, you'll see the Oxbow Eco Center, which is a main component along this portion of the corridor and also a great amenity to St. Lucie County and the city. Then in purple, you'll see school sites. We do have Rivers Edge Elementary School and Southern Oak Middle School at the northern limits. And then at the southern limits, we actually have a private Montessori school there. And then we have some churches as well. Calvary Church to the north on the west side of St. James. Relative to commercial being red, right in the center is the Publix shopping center, the Dollar Tree just to the north of that. And then at the more southerly, right beyond the FPL right-of-way there on the screen, near the sheet 1 label, you'll see a red area identified, and that's undeveloped, but it is planned commercial, or at least that from a land use standpoint at this time, but it is undeveloped. So we're at a point, I'm going to read the first question, and this is interactive, so I challenge everybody to respond and provide these answers. What is your affiliation with St. James Drive? And your responses are, number one, a resident within the St. Lucie North neighborhood, and again, that's the immediate area. So if you live in a residential area that you use St. James Drive as your primary way to get to and from that neighborhood, that would be the appropriate response. Two, if you're a city resident, but not specifically in the St. James corridor, but you happen to use it, you travel it, or you're just a concerned resident within the city. And then three, if you're a business owner within this area or corridor. And we're going to just take a moment, let everyone respond to that, and then we'll provide the responses to that and proceed with the presentation. Again, number one, if you're a resident within this immediate study area in the St. James corridor. Two, if you're just a city resident who's interested in the planning and improvements within the city. And three, if you're a business owner. Don't be shy. Okay, and we're going to close it up now. And the responses, as you would expect, about 75% of the responses were residences within the St. Lucie North neighborhood, and 25% being just citizens within, or residents within the city. Surprisingly, no business owners, so that may be a stakeholder group following tonight that we may want to engage, staff and Paul. Next, so the corridor. So this portion, this almost 2.5 mile portion of St. James Drive, is really it's one of, I think, the coolest corridors because of the potential. We have Oxbow kind of right in the middle of it. It has a lot of existing characteristics from a landscape standpoint and a natural or native sense that make it a really great corridor. And one of our goals is to enhance that to the best of our ability and hopefully use the landscape and the aesthetic improvements to also address water quality and some functional opportunities that exist. But as you can see from this, starting from the top, working down, existing 8-foot sidewalk that exists, a lot of native vegetation. A lot of that is because of the Oxbow Eco Center and its frontage along St. James. We have one signalized intersection, I believe, which is St. James Drive and St. James Boulevard as they converge near the commercial center. We have a number of non-signalized intersections, which we are going to address. Bus stops, typical street lights you'll see an image of. The lower left image is existing road conditions, and you'll see just essentially, 2 travel lanes and, somewhat of a shoulder. Our drainage pattern predominantly is a swaled system within this road corridor, and you see that. And then you'll see kind of the existing, well, you'll see the existing crosswalks or road intersection conditions there, whether it's a mid-St. James Drive crosswalk, a side street, and again, a signalized crosswalk or intersection. So it's kind of the lay of the land, so to speak, within this corridor. You're not getting off that easy. Another question. We're going to try and keep everybody engaged tonight. And this is homework tonight. So what is your main concern with St. James Drive? The options are, number one, safety. By safety, we mean, speed of vehicles, pedestrian crossings, school crossings, that sort of thing. So anything that would be correlated to the safety within that experience, you would select number one. If your main concern is multimodal opportunities, such as sidewalks, additional sidewalks, bike paths, a lack thereof, but any additional existing or proposed connection methods, ways of getting through this corridor other than a vehicle, select number two. And then third option, number three, would be aesthetics, so landscape and the overall experience of the roadway. And again, we'll take a moment, let everyone kind of digest that. For the participants, just to kind of go back a bit, these are the three main categories that we're tasked with within this corridor. So safety, multimodal opportunities, and then the aesthetics or the environmental. And those intertwine a bit. So if you hear us refer to aesthetics and environmental, it's the same category there. And we're going to go ahead and close this one up. And responses that we're seeing is safety, 43%, multimodal opportunities, 43%, and aesthetics, 14%. So we're equally weighted on safety and multimodal opportunities, with this aesthetics coming in, beyond that at 14%. So too bad for Paul and I, the landscape architects here, but really good for Steph. So good showing. No, I appreciate that participation. So regarding safety, one of the first main areas, we have three questions, I believe, in this bank here. So regarding safety specifically, what's important to you? Number one would be speed of which the vehicle's traveling within St. James. Two, pedestrian crossings. Three, school drop-off or stacking areas, since we do have the two schools on the northern end of St. James. And then number four, street sidewalk lighting. So. And thank you, Avi. And just you can choose up to three of those items, so you don't have to stick with just one. But so if you want, choose one or up to three of these that are important to you. And we'll give a couple moments here for response. And the audience tonight thought this was all about just listening. See? We'll give everyone about 5 more seconds, and we will close this question. And responses. So top two out of that were pedestrian crossings and street sidewalk lighting. Both of those coming in equally weighted at about 57%. Next behind that was speed of vehicles at 43%. And finally, the school drop-off and stacking areas at 29%. So definitely lighting, pedestrian crossings, and speed of vehicles are the top three on those four. So thank you very much for that input. And last question of this section regarding the multimodal. And again, that's connectivity. In general terms, that's, other ways, hopefully beyond the car, of getting from, point A to point B within this corridor. What's important to you? Options are, number one, and again, this question you can select up to three as well. So number one, wider sidewalks, and the wider the better. Number two, bike lanes within the roadway. 3 transit stops at major destinations, 4 connection to existing neighborhood parks. And I did not highlight, I'll come back to that map. We do have 2 existing neighborhood parks, more to the southern end of this neighborhood that we can come back to and I'll identify. And 5 is connectivity to larger trail and greenway systems. So again, number 1, wider sidewalks, 2, bike lanes within roadway, 3, transit stops at major destinations such as the commercial or Oxbow, 4, connection to existing neighborhood parks, and 5, connection to larger trail greenway systems. You can select up to 3 of these items. And we'll be closing this up in about 5 seconds. Drum roll, please. And the response, wow, surprising. Steph, and Paul, we overwhelmingly connectivity to the larger trail and greenway systems. That's great. Surprising, but great. Followed closely behind at 80% to connection to existing neighborhood parks. 60% was wider sidewalks. And then we had at 40% bike lanes and 20% being the transit stops. So overwhelmingly, connectivity seems to be the response, right? Connectivity to the larger systems and opportunities that exist within the city and the county, especially in this area, and then connection to the existing neighborhood parks. So that's great feedback. And then obviously that connectivity needs to be done in an appropriate fashion with sidewalks and systems that are hopefully as wide as they can be. Thank you very much. You're off the hook for a couple slides, so appreciate the participation, but please stick around. So safety and multimodal. We have a toolkit, so to speak, of things that can be of opportunities, and whether we apply all of these or a certain amount of them within this corridor, that is to be determined. But what I'm going to show you, and we'll walk through it collaboratively, are some of those options within this toolkit. So walking you just through quickly the imaging, enhanced crosswalks, the upper left, enhanced crosswalk patterns and color usage. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen or you have within the community and adjacent communities bike lanes. And as you get closer to intersections, those bike lanes and travel lanes are highlighted in the really bright green. You can do the similar thing to highlight pedestrian crosswalks and connectivity options. Again, the more visual, the better. That heightened awareness provides safety. And there are some interesting ways you can do it as well. We're actually going to show you in later slides how you can employ public art as well in the ground plane and at intersections to even further heighten that awareness. The upper right is an enhanced signalized intersection. That's kind of a composite image showing a lot of different techniques being employed, both pedestrian as well as the safe corners and just the overall design of the intersection employing current techniques. The next kind of mid-level of images on the left hand, you have the raised speed table. That's usually received in mixed fashion from the public, right? This idea of the raised speed tables, they are effective, but if you're experiencing them, sometimes it can be a hassle from time to time. But raised speed tables where appropriate, raised crosswalks where you elevate the pedestrians again and give them the sense of priority versus a vehicle. Pedestrian refuge islands. So we do have a median, and we're going to explore that a little bit more in depth during this evening. But providing a opportunity of refuge in the median when you're crossing a large right-of-way, such as St. James, which is about 150 to 170 feet, I believe, in width. And obviously enhanced crosswalk signage in general as well. Rumble strips, pedestrian lighting, and pedestrian path lighting are all areas, all elements within this toolkit that we can utilize within this corridor. This is a plan view, really showing two primary intersections, proposed intersection with enhancements in the upper left, signalized or even non-signalized, I would assume, Steph. And then the lower right is one where we have just a typical side street interfacing with St. James. And a lot of those elements that were on the previous slide are shown here in plan view. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. We can always come back to it, but you'll see obviously the crosswalks heightened, the color being used within the bike lanes to create more visual awareness there. And then again, employing these techniques in our existing roadway in this area. You'll even see in the medians that area of refuge as you cross it that you can stop and then traverse. And then this is an image that kind of just, I think, a really solid image that kind of puts all of those elements that you see in plan and from that toolkit in play at a typical intersection. This would be a signalized intersection. You'll see the crosswalks identified very vibrantly in the white, the bike lanes in the green, the areas of refuge, landscape being used as well to kind of narrow in and create a tighter roadway experience for the vehicles, thus slowing them down. One thing to note, and we'll go through this a little bit later, is the proposed corridor that you're seeing here and that's depicted are 11-foot travel lanes, 7-foot bike lanes on either side, and all of that is being proposed within the existing roadway. So we're not expanding, adding asphalt to the corridor. We're working within the asphalt and the pavement that exists out there today. You'll also see, if you have a keen eye, if you look at the median, that when we get into landscape, we'll touch on that, the bioswale and the use of the median functionally and aesthetically, but it's also curbed. And one of our main objectives was to provide curbing along the majority of that median. There may be areas where it isn't possible, but I would say for the most part, we would be curbing that median element and making sure the drainage is appropriate and functional. I'm going to pause for a second and ask Steph, and Paul for their input if I missed anything, but Avi, if you go back to the image real quick, I missed one thing that was important. The other thing you'll say, I alluded to in the last slide as a toolkit, but the intersection itself, you see these giant palm fronds and stuff. That's one technique of utilizing public art and creating this visual interest across the entire intersection. It could be thematic. When we get into aesthetics, one of our suggestions is that we utilize public art, those funds, employ them in a way of maybe with local artists here, and that these intersections are themed from an environmental standpoint or stormwater or whatever it may be that's pertinent to this road corridor and this neighborhood. So I did want to touch on that. Anything I may have quickly missed?
Yeah, I think Steve, if we're going to be talking about the corridor itself and, what the thoughts are on how to improve it, it's important to know that the existing corridor is very environmentally friendly with the way the drainage works. It's a roadside swale drainage system. The water runs off from the roadway and runs through swales. So it gives it an opportunity to soak in the ground before it has to go to a detention system. We're looking at making sure we keep that intact and continue on with that train of thought with the design. That's why we're only looking at putting curbing in the medians. We'll still allow water to flow into the medians and let them work that way, but the outside of the system will continue to work the way it does from a bioswale, from an environmentally friendly and stormwater safe standpoint.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, and the curbing of the swales will also allow to get us trees closer to the edge of the pavement, which will, in theory, help slow traffic down, especially at these intersections and whatnot. So that's another reason why we wanted to add curbing to the medians.
Excellent. Thank you. Avi, if we go back to the slide real quick, just to note, because I think it shows a lot of these elements. One thing that may have been missed, I know it was by me, but is lighting as well. Obviously, one of our objectives is to is not necessarily to light the entire corridor, but light those intersections, whether it's signalized or not, and increase both the vehicular or travelway lighting and the pedestrian lighting systems. It also is responsive to the residents' responses this evening as well, as far as the importance of lighting. So, you're back on the clock, so we need responses. So you can't fall asleep. How often do you bike or walk along St. James Drive? Responses: number 1, daily; number 2, weekly; and number 3, very seldom. We have no way of fact checking this, by the way, so please be honest. But again, how often do you bike or walk along St. James Drive? 1, daily; 2, weekly; 3, very seldom. You good? Thank you. We'll be closing it in 5 seconds. Avi really needs to add a drum roll sound effect to these, I think. And the results are in. Very seldom. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Shame, no.
Maybe that's why we need to do something to the corridor. Huh?
I think so. I think that is a cry for better connectivity throughout. So we appreciate the responses. 75%, very seldom. And the other 25, I didn't quite catch them, but daily was 25%. So that's interesting. It's either you use it a lot and for a variety of reasons, or you don't use it at all. It's interesting that we don't have any weekly, somewhere in between. But I think if we address the very seldom by better connectivity and a better corridor itself, that daily would, that would probably flip. So thank you. Appreciate bringing that back up. Next question, number 6. If you had your choice of how to travel St. James Drive, what would you use? 1, your feet, walking, jogging, even dancing. That is allowed, I think. Number 2, bicycle, unicycle, or trike. Number 3, golf cart. And, the fancy term is neighborhood electric vehicle, and NEV, but number 4, magic carpet. And I have to have full disclosure. We did a public survey on another project within the city, and that was an interesting response. So this is a little homage to that. And if that person happens to live in the St. Lucie North neighborhood, I'm sure we'll get a response. Again, the 4 responses: 1, your feet; 2, bicycle or other wheeled type vehicles; 3, golf cart; and 4, magic carpet.
Would that be a way to kind of void the corridor completely?
It could be, yeah. We'd have to designate some magic carpet spots at Publix, I think, though. Yeah.
Going back to the other one, people not using it very seldom, if not at all, kind of shows you why the interconnectivity answer was number 1 in one of the previous questions.
Absolutely.
They don't have a place to go. Yep. There's no reason.
We'll be closing it in 5 seconds. And the responses are in. Equally weighted, we have walking, jogging, dancing, basically your feet, and bicycle, unicycle, trike. So you're walking and bicycle both at 40%. That's over 80% of the responses. And then 20% would be golf cart or NEVs. And surprisingly, I guess that resident does not live in this neighborhood, but no magic carpet. So appreciate that. So, so that was the next slide. So we're gonna take a moment. There's landscape and there's the environmental and the stormwater component that we're gonna get into. But I want to go back to this map. There's 2 things to highlight. And Avi, can I highlight anything up here or not?
Hold on.
Okay. I'm gonna try and just describe this, not to take a ton of time, but. If you're looking at the upper right hand, the small map of the entire study area, and you look at the location that's identified, that location is Nah, I'll try. I'm going to try this and see. That location that's identified is within that east-west running corridor is an FPL right-of-way. And then just south of that, in the area that's predominantly yellow, to the right side or the east, you'll see a lot of yellow in a green park spot or a green area identified. That is one of those neighborhood existing parks. And then to the left or to the west corner, upper west corner near the FPL easement, the south side of the FPL easement, there's another park. So those are the two park locations that we have within this neighborhood. And again, going back, and Steph pointed out the connectivity issue in response from the participants tonight, getting to those parks and to the other opportunities is fairly important. What this slide, what came from understanding and really diving deep into this corridor, we were always looking for other opportunities, hidden opportunities beyond just the immediate scope of how do you make this corridor work. And one of them is the image to the left shows a section of right-of-way, obviously owned and adjacent parcel owned by the city of Port St. Lucie. And we thought this might be an opportunity for a small pocket park in an area in which residents could, if they needed to, obviously, if they didn't have the means, they could drive to park and engage a portion of the corridor if they're not inclined to use the entire corridor and they're in that seldom category. This is a great opportunity to do that. We're envisioning this pocket park to have the potential for maybe some fitness stations and obviously areas of seating and respite. The green area would be an incorporation of bioswale and some of the same elements, similar elements that we're using within the entire corridor. But like other, I think, really successful and embraced corridors within the city, such as Crosstown, where we have fitness stations that are heavily used, this is actually a little hidden opportunity to provide access and parking and convenience to the residents that could then further use the corridor. And it may even provide a launching point or connectivity along that FPL right-of-way corridor as well for this greater connectivity and continuity in the system. Anything on that I should? Okay. So moving on. Question number 7. Would you walk or bike more often if some of the proposed improvements were made? This is an easy one. 1 is yes, 2 is no, 3 is maybe. Would you walk or bike more often if proposed improvements were? So all of you guys who responded seldom, give me a yes, a no, or a maybe. And we're going to close this out. Overwhelming yes, 86% yes, and the remaining 14% were maybe. So no no's. So that's
Good sign.
a good sign. I like it. And moving on. So we've covered, again, somewhat briefly, but safety, multimodal. The third element that we're tasked with understanding and providing recommendations on is the landscape, environmental, and water quality component, which is stormwater. And so with that, some of these are a little redundant, but going back to, again, from a landscape perspective and environmental standpoint, what does this corridor, what's it comprised of? Overwhelmingly, I'd say, native clusters, right? We've got great opportunities with Oxbow and that frontage for these existing clusters. We have a fair amount of street trees, predominantly oaks, and the palms we have are predominantly sables in clusters. And so we have some good bones and some good structure already existing within it to build from. We also have some areas that aren't as desirable or just aren't consistent with ultimately making this corridor feel cohesive and pulled together and kind of stating the same sense of experience, which I think this corridor really has that opportunity to do for the city. Some of those elements we've been studying for removal or working within the overall design would be, we have some pockets of understory and some crepe myrtles. We have some isolated trees such as the golden rain trees in areas. We have some miscellaneous random plantings that occur. It's those areas that we really want to, take a hard look at and see how we can make this corridor from a landscape and aesthetic standpoint pulled together. We have another challenge as well, that the eastern side with Oxbow is more native, natural, heavier vegetation existing and more mature, and more so the west side, especially with the commercial development, has more of a commercial type of development and aesthetic in the landscape. Everything that we'll be proposing, and this was echoed in our stakeholder meetings, and it's also echoed in just the philosophy of the City of Port St. Lucie and the landscape code. But we're looking for a predominantly native plant palette, as expressed in these images. Not to say that we wouldn't use an ornamental or two in a certain area, but that would be more geared to the functionality of that plant in that place, so in that specific place. And you can see some of the species: live oak, slash pine, sable, silver buttonwood, Dahoon holly, the grasses, palmetto, cocoa plum, and so forth. Going back to the median, and the corridor is blessed with this median. I think it helps create a lot of the aesthetic and the experience of the corridor. It's not just travel lanes, and it's a fairly large, wide median. We want to put it to use and put it to work, essentially. So the main element and way of doing that is to create a bioswale in it. It won't be throughout. It'll be in areas defined. Steph can elaborate on those if he wants, but it's basically a bioswale is the use of plants and native material, natural materials to treat the water. So the storm water and the water flows off of the road and into this swale, and then before it perks and goes through the system and is conveyed elsewhere and ultimately to our rivers in the North Fork of the St. Lucie River, it's treated. These plants help cleanse and treat that water before it perks and or flows elsewhere.
And Steve, one of the things that's worth pointing out is that this median is already set up to allow that to occur. Most medians that you see on your major roadways are built up and high, and the water sheets off into the roadway and out. This median is depressed. It allows the stormwater to come into it, allows water to come into it. So setting it up for a bioswale is actually fairly easily done. Your backbone, the bones of the drainage system, is already there for you to allow that to occur.
Excellent. And, that's a key point. JD has, and Mr. Dunn has expressed to us that, with any project, but especially this one, almost 2.5 miles is a long road corridor, right? Funds aren't infinite. So one of our goals going through this is to understand the best possible solutions, any and all, and then correlate those into a budget that is obtainable and implementable via phasing and or, what we choose to implement and how. And utilizing that existing structure at the median functionally like this is one great way of doing that. And appreciate that.
And just quickly, I want to point out that the majority of the median will still be trees and sod. It won't be just a continuous long bioswale. I think we'll pick key locations to add these bioswales, but for the most part, we'll follow the city's guidelines for planted medians, where it's not just a ton of understory, but mainly canopy trees and sod.
Good point. Thank you. And with that, so a plan view and a cross-section of what that would mean and what Mr. Gillis just stated is, again, bioswales in pockets with, again, street trees. And right in the middle is that median. Left to right of it, you can see street trees and plantings in the bioswale in the middle. And then you'll also see in the lower left of the plan view image how we're intending that thematically the plants and the palette that are used would also be expressed on both the east and west sides for the most part of the road corridor where possible, and within FDOT and city guidelines, as well as St. Lucie County. And one thing to mention, this project is a true partnership between the city of Port St. Lucie and St. Lucie County, and all the documents that are being prepared through this process are being reviewed and through a process both with the city ultimately and the county in that partnership. And actually, I'm going to go back. So plan view, bioswale, street trees. Below this, on this image, you'll see a typical cross-section of St. James with the elements there. I'm going to kind of walk in because there's a lot of symmetry. On either side, right or left, you'll see within that right-of-way the 12-foot multimodal path, the landscape, a landscape existing area, the proposed 7-foot bike lanes, 11-foot travel lanes, and that's 2 on either side, and then the median in the middle there. And this is a cross-section through what would be the proposed, bioswale area, basically. And then I mentioned earlier the St. James corridor is predominantly 150 foot in width, but we do have areas where it expands to about 175 feet. And those are the areas where we have a bit more opportunity to leverage the sides, the east or west sides of the road, to have additional pockets of landscape and to enhance or plant new landscape around those pedestrian walkways and the multimodal systems to help insulate them from the travel and the traffic lanes. And a picture's worth 1,000 words, so all of those words that were just expressed, somewhat captured here. Maybe a little overzealous on the bioswale, but this image kind of paints that picture of what the corridor, through implementation of some or all of these elements, could be like. So the median, again, bioswale landscape, again in pockets. And then on the sides, you'll have the travel lanes, the bike lanes introduced with their identification, and then the 12-foot multimodal pedestrian systems. And then again, where we can, because St. James and the uniqueness of this corridor, adjacent to Oxbow, maybe some of the FPL transmission corridor, where we can find those opportunities to create areas or islands of respite where you have seating and trash and maybe pet waste stations and that sort of thing, and some landscaping. That's what we're trying to convey or capture on the right side of the image. And as I'm sure being residents, mostly residents within this area, you know that this is a highly used corridor. This shot's fairly recent with development occurring, obviously. So getting these systems in place will be beneficial. Anything on this image to highlight that
I think just to reiterate that in keeping costs in mind, that I want to just reiterate that the pavement that you see, the proposals that we have using the 11-foot travel lanes and the 7-foot wide bike lane, all can be done with the existing pavement. So milling and resurfacing as opposed to reconstruction or widening are all tools that we can use to allow this to move forward at a cost-effective method.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Thank you. And I hope everybody's still with us and not asleep. So question 8's coming up. Question 8, where do you see landscape improvements being most beneficial? The responses are 1, bioswale, which is that median area. 2, pedestrian pathway and landscape areas. So if I go back, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit. So if you go back to this image, 1 would be the bioswale, the median area there. 2 would be the right side of the image where your pedestrian and your expanded sidewalks and that connectivity is. And then 3 would be street and median trees to control vehicle speed. And as Paul mentioned earlier, that would be those additional street trees in the median or on the sides of the travel lanes that would help control speed. So where do you see landscape improvements being most beneficial to you? 1, bioswale. 2, the pedestrian pathways. 3 would be street trees in the median and on the sides. 5 seconds. I got the signal from Avi. And the response is 50% street and median trees to control vehicle speed, followed up at 33% by pedestrian pathway and landscape, and then finally 17% being bioswale. And I think that may actually represent, that might be a good correlation to our concept where the bioswale is in pockets. It's not overwhelming the majority of the median and so forth. So that's good. Street and median trees, controlling speed, 50%, half of the response, followed closely by pedestrian pathways and then bioswale. So thank you very much. And that is our closing slide of thank you. So the meeting is not over. You're still tasked with giving us good quality questions, and we will respond more in a collaborative fashion here. With that, I appreciate everybody's participation. Avi, do we have any questions? We aren't going anywhere. You got us. We had this date set and booked, so we're not going anywhere. We're here. If anybody is participating and has a question for us, we'd be happy to take the time and answer it. If we don't have any, I think we did a job well done. No, we answered all of them in the presentation. We'll give a few moments. Avi, what's our participation like right now?
We got 10 people.
Okay,
Question did come in.
excellent.
So we do have one question. Any chance to get speed humps on Peachtree and Dunn?
Steph?
Speed humps on Peachtree and Dunn. So those are things that can be looked at. We can bring it up. We'll bring it up with the engineering to Public Works Department. We really are concentrating on the St. James corridor, but these are all roadways that contribute to St. James. So your question has been noted, and it will be forwarded on for further evaluation.
We have another question.
Excellent.
There's so many kids and families, and it's a huge cut through for the St. James area. It's more of a comment than a question.
Of that same road corridor?
Yeah, well, it's the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Duly noted.
For the speed humps.
Yeah. We are going to be here for a few moments, not to take anybody else's time away, but I would like to again thank JD for his leadership and guidance through this process with us and his continued efforts as we move beyond tonight. For everyone still on, our next steps are to obviously take this public meeting. We're going to start the design process within the road corridor, working with staff and understanding the applicability of these potential options and obviously the residents' feedback tonight and our stakeholders. And then that set of documents will go through a review and approval process, both through internally here with the city, but also a review process with St. Lucie County as well. Appreciate everybody's attendance tonight via the virtual environment of Zoom. And I'd like to again thank both Steph Mathis and Paul Goulis for joining me tonight and aiding with the presentation. Avi, any other questions?
Nope, nothing else.
We appreciate the attendance tonight and thank you for your participation.
Steve, I do have a question. Not on here, but I have a question, or maybe
Yes.
a comment. If folks think of future questions to ask, how can they? Who should they be sending the questions to?
Do we have an email address in the PowerPoint?
No.
Okay, so as the project manager for the city, they can send them to me. And my email address is smatthes@ct-eng.com. Just put the tagline as St. James Corridor, and I know what it'll be about.
Thank you, Steph. I appreciate that. And one thing to note, I believe Mr. Dunn is going to have this meeting also available online and through the city's website. So if your neighbors did not have a chance to participate tonight, or you just want to relive all those wonderful questions, that will be available online, and we'll make sure that the website also reflects Mr. Mathis's email. So sign him up for all those magazines and free coffee out there. Appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Good night.